Patrick, tell me about your this is for tomorrow, obviously. Tell me about your party's jobs plan, which you're unveiling today.
For a very long time now, this country has been cursed by an economy in which big business crowds out the rich diversity that an economy needs. As a result, we've seen low productivity, low wages, and a great deal of the profit in the economy sucked out by those big businesses and stashed in tax havens or extracted out of the economy altogether. Instead, we need to invest in the small, indigenous, middle-sized and small businesses, the kind of businesses that have their roots in the community and will work to make a go of it even through tough times. That's the kind of business model that we think Scotland could benefit from. The UK could benefit from it as well, but it would be a real change from the big business domination that we've seen over many, many years.
You talk about a transition to a jobs-rich economy which respects the environment. How do you make that happen in practical terms?
If you think about what it means to run an economy which operates within environmental limits, it means there's a huge amount of work that needs doing. Let's take the built environment first of all. People's homes, people's businesses need a huge amount of investment to reduce energy waste. That's one of the best ways that we can save people a bit of money off their energy bills, reduce the reliance on those big energy companies, but also save jobs in the construction sector and reduce our carbon emissions. There's a transformational scale of work that's needed in the built environment to reduce energy waste, improve energy efficiency, and also to invest in the renewable electricity, which could be benefiting small businesses and households if we decentralise ownership as well.
Do you think that's particularly excuse me, it's obviously something that you think particularly sets you apart from the other parties, what you're proposing here?
There have been good moves to increase the amount of renewable electricity on the grid, but we're not really seeing the opportunity for community and local ownership on the scale that would really benefit the whole of Scotland. We want to see an energy industry where the economic benefit is spread throughout our whole economy. Households, small businesses, local communities, as well as the public sector could be owning a share of that energy industry rather than seeing it dominated by a handful of multinationals. If we do that, then we'll be generating the revenue that can be reinvested in a better built environment, in a stronger economy, and in the jobs that future generations will need to live with. You know, we need sustainable jobs, not here today, gone tomorrow industries.
You've touched on it in a couple of those answers, but the quote-unquote the world's most ambitious home energy efficiency program, very ambitious.
This country, Scotland in particular, more so than the rest of the UK, has a real problem with a highly inefficient housing stock and the rest of our buildings as well. We can improve building standards, but most of the buildings that are going to be here when we're supposed to hit those 2050 climate change targets are already built. We're already living in most of those buildings already. So we need to invest in reducing that energy demand. It's a great way to save people money, save jobs in the construction sector. Many of those will be small independent businesses or contractors rather than big businesses that'll be here today, gone tomorrow, but also to reduce those carbon emissions and actually get us back on track on the climate change targets. We've missed 3 of them in a row. We're bound to miss the next one as well. We need to start taking radical action.
On a fundamental level, Scotland's already got a higher employment rate than the rest of the UK. There are about 200,000 more people in work now than there were in 2010. Aren't things already looking up in terms of the job market?
We really need to drill down under the job figures that the UK government likes to crow about and look at the quality of employment, the pay levels, the huge inequality gap that exists in many large businesses, particularly the multinationals, the huge gap between the highest and lowest earners. We want to see that gap close. We want to make sure that we have, smoother pay ratios so that people at the bottom are not living in poverty wages. The welfare state has been turned into a mechanism for subsidising poverty pay. Instead of that, we should be requiring good quality employment, high wage levels. A £10 minimum wage by the end of the next UK Parliament is entirely achievable. Labour's proposition on the minimum wage barely even reaches beyond where the living wage is today, and that's by 2020. We need to do better than that if we're going to have rewarding employment that leaves people living a life of decency, that doesn't leave people in working poverty.
And I guess a core effect or side effect, depending on which way you look at it, of your policy is the impact of job losses in the oil and gas sector due to the downturn in that oil and gas sector at the moment is in the long run going to be minimised.
Scotland has seen many industries disappear, leaving whole communities abandoned. We've seen that with heavy industries in the Central Belt. We're seeing it now with the end of the coal industry, both in terms of open cast, which is on its last legs, and the imminent closure of Longannet. We should be investing for the long term in these areas, an area that's over-dependent on unsustainable industry. We need to be spending years investing in the alternative, in something which will really last, so that we don't lurch from crisis to crisis. Particularly in terms of North Sea oil, the opportunity is staring us in the face to invest in the renewable alternative, the alternative that will last, that will be sustainable, that will provide high quality, rewarding jobs long into the future, instead of just thinking that we can lurch from crisis to crisis to crisis.
You're launching this jobs plan at a time where you've got a whole load of new members, something like 9,000 new members, off the back of what happened last year with the independence referendum. Obviously, things are pretty good for the Scottish Greens.
The party has been really buoyed up by the incredible energy that our new members have brought. We're now approaching 9,000 members across Scotland, and we're seeing branch activism crop up in places where we've really had very little activism in the past. That bodes very well for the future. About 40% of our members are under 30 years old, so we've got a very young, energetic party, and we're seeing people really keen to get involved in politics. Many of them have been involved in other parties before, but a great many have been switched on to politics and to green ideas during the referendum debate, and it's really fantastic to know that we'll be able to reach far more voters in future elections than we've ever been able to before.
Do you look at given that the increase in membership in terms of a percentage is comparable or perhaps even more than what the SNP are accomplishing, do you look at perhaps the impact that they seem to be having on the campaign with a little bit of jealousy?
We know that first past the post is a tough gig for the Greens. First past the post is a brilliant system if all you want to do is make people choose between two things. These days people want to choose between a broader range of options. We know that there's a much more diverse multi-party democracy struggling to assert itself in this country, not just in Scotland but throughout the UK. First past the post has had its day. It has to go. It's not good enough to force people to go through the polling station and come out feeling that they just settled for the least worst option. We hope people will vote for what they really believe in. We hope that people will see that green ideas have got a huge benefit for our society, for our economy, and obviously in terms of handing on a sustainable, livable environment for the next generation. But the ability to reach more voters with this incredible influx of new members is going to stand us in good stead for future years with our fairer voting systems.
Just on the Gordon Brown stuff, he's giving a speech in Kirkcaldy tonight. He says, if elected, on day one of a Labor government, Scottish Labor will send 167 food banks emergency payments of £5,000 each to tackle poverty crisis. What's your response to what he's saying?
Well, it's of course necessary to have an immediate and urgent response to the crisis levels of poverty, and food poverty in particular, which exist in this country. But that immediate sticking plaster response is nowhere near enough. We need to rebuild a welfare state that's worthy of the name. We need to ensure that work pays a decent amount of income so that people working aren't living in poverty. You know, it's not enough to hear from a man who, when he was Chancellor, presided over a growing gap between rich and poor, and the beginnings of a welfare state which was subsidising poverty wages. It's not enough to hear about sticking plaster solutions. The urgent response, the immediate urgent response is necessary, but it's not enough. We need to rebuild a fairer, more equal society where there's no need for food banks in the first place.